The firelight danced across polished silverware, casting amber ripples over crystal glasses. The smell of rosemary and slow-roasted beef wrapped around me warm, familiar, almost comforting. Across the table, Ryan, my only son, leaned back in his leather chair, laughing just a little too loud. The sound echoed in the vaulted dining room, bouncing off walls lined with oil paintings I'd never seen before. Beside him, Sophie, my daughter-in-law, wasn't laughing. Her fork moved in lazy circles through the potatoes, her gaze fixed somewhere far away. Then it happened. A soft touch against my hand. I looked down. A folded slip of paper barely bigger than a matchbook tucked under the edge of my napkin. Her handwriting quick and slanted. "They poisoned your drink." The candlelight caught the deep red swirl in my glass, the same glass Ryan had filled the moment I sat down. My pulse slowed heavy and deliberate. Years of running my business taught me to read a man's eyes, and my own son was watching me now, like a predator waiting for the kill. I didn't flinch. I swirled the wine, letting the aroma of oak and fruit mask the sudden bitterness in my mouth. From the corner of my eye, Sophie gave the smallest nod. She knew, and whatever she knew, could end me tonight. If you think family dinners are always safe, you're about to find out how wrong that is. Subscribe now, because what came next still keeps me up at night. My name's Thomas Walker, 63 years old. Born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, where the summers are humid and folks still wave to each other from the porch. Most people in town know me for Walker's Hardware 7 stores across the southeast. Started with one small shop I ran with my wife Claire. Back then we couldn't afford a neon sign, so I painted our name by hand. It's still there, faded on the original storefront. Claire was the heart of it all. She could sell a lawnmower to a man who didn't have a yard and make him thank her for it. When she passed 7 years ago, the stores stayed busy, but the house turned silent. Too silent. Nights are the worst. No TV. Just the ticking of the old pocket watch she gave me on our 25th anniversary. I carry it every day, not for the time, but because I can still feel the warmth of her hands the night she placed it in mine. I never remarried, never traveled much. I keep the stores running, pay my taxes, and try not to think too hard about the distance with my son Ryan. It wasn't always this way. When he was a boy, he'd ride in the delivery truck with me, waving at customers like he owned the road. Somewhere between college and his first failed business, that smile changed. Still, he's my son. And I never thought I'd see the day he'd look at me as anything other than a father. Ryan's 36 now. Tall, good-looking, the kind of man people trust at first glance. He's got my eyes, but Claire's easy smile. When he was little, he'd build forts out of cardboard in the store's back room while I worked the register. Customers loved him. They'd slip him candy from their pockets, saying, "This boy's gonna run the place someday." For a while I believed it, but somewhere after college things shifted. Ryan had big dreams, real estate developments in Miami, high-end condos, talk of investors lining up. He always sounded like he was one deal away from striking gold. Then the calls started. At first, they were friendly. "Dad, can you loan me a little to cover this gap?" But soon it was bigger numbers. Hundreds of thousands. I bailed him out twice. The third time I said no, and just like that our conversations went cold. He moved to Florida full-time. I heard whispers from old friends down there, deals falling apart, partners walking away, then nothing for almost 2 years, until last week. My phone lit up with his name. His voice was bright, almost too bright. He said he'd bought a new place in Charleston, South Carolina, a house you have to see, Dad. He wanted me to come for dinner. Said Sophie was making my favorite roast. said it was time to put the past behind us. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I really did. Sophie's 34. She met Ryan back when he was still making promises he could almost keep. She worked as a paralegal in Jacksonville, Florida, sharp, organized the kind of woman who could quote contract clauses from memory. The first time I met her, she shook my hand firmly and called me Mr. Walker. Claire liked her immediately. Said she had a good backbone, Claire's highest compliment for anyone. After they got married, Sophie and I spoke on the phone every so often. Birthdays, holidays, always polite, never too personal. I noticed, though, that she asked more questions about the business than Ryan ever had. Things like, do you have a succession plan, or do you trust your managers? At the time, I chalked it up to curiosity. When Claire passed, Sophie sent flowers and a handwritten card. I kept it in my desk drawer. Her words were simple, but they felt genuine. The last few years I'd heard less from her. Ryan said she was busy with the new place or handling legal work for friends. I didn't think much of it. But when Ryan called about dinner in Charleston, it was Sophie who chimed in on speakerphone. Her voice was warm, steady. It'll be just like old times, Mr. Walker. We want to start fresh. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe both of them. Because if there's one thing I learned after Claire died, it's that starting fresh can feel like coming home. It was a Tuesday evening when Ryan called. I'd just locked up the main store in Savannah and was pouring myself a glass of iced tea. "Dad," he said, voice brighter than I remembered, "we're having a little family dinner this Friday. You, me, Sophie. No business talk, just a good meal." I told him I had a full week at the stores. He brushed it off. "Come on, Dad, it's Charleston. Just a few hours' drive. Sophie's making that slow roast beef you love. We can talk like we used to." Before I could answer, Sophie's voice came on the line. "Mr. Walker, it would mean the world to us. We've been talking about this for months." Her tone was warm, but there was a kind of practiced smoothness to it. The same tone lawyers use when guiding you toward a signature. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe I just wanted to believe my son still thought of me as more than a bank account. Ryan texted me the address an hour later. A street in an upscale neighborhood I recognized from real estate ads. Houses there didn't sell for less than $2 million. Ryan never explained how he could afford it, and I didn't ask. Still, something about the invitation stuck with me. Not the words, not the food. It was the timing. Out of the blue. After years of silence. Claire always told me, when someone comes back into your life suddenly, there's always a reason. Friday morning came quicker than I expected. The air in Savannah was thick with summer heat, the kind that sticks to your shirt before you've even had your first coffee. I stood in my bedroom looking at the navy blue suit Claire had bought me for our 25th anniversary. She'd said every man needs one suit for the good days and the hard ones. I wasn't sure which this dinner would be. I shaved, polished my shoes, and packed a small overnight bag just in case the evening ran late. From the cabinet, I pulled out a bottle of 20-year-old bourbon I'd been saving. A peace offering, I told myself. While I waited for my car to cool in the driveway, I glanced at the text from Ryan again. The address was in an exclusive Charleston neighborhood I'd only seen in magazines. Tree-lined streets, private docks, and houses that looked more like estates. As I loaded my bag into the trunk my neighbor Mrs. Henderson waved from her porch. "Going somewhere fancy, Thomas?" "Just dinner with family," I said, forcing a smile. The truth was, I felt a knot in my stomach. It wasn't nerves. It was the way the whole thing had come together too fast, too smooth. Claire would have told me to trust my instincts. Instead, I put the key in the ignition and pulled out of the driveway, telling myself this was just a dinner. But deep down, I knew dinners like this rarely stayed just dinners. The highway out of Savannah stretched wide and empty under a pale blue sky. Spanish moss swayed from oak branches, casting shifting shadows across the asphalt. I rolled down the window, letting the warm wind carry the faint scent of salt water from the coast. For the first hour, the drive felt almost peaceful. Classic rock played low on the radio, and I let myself imagine a good evening, laughter, old stories, maybe even a hug that didn't feel forced. But the closer I got to Charleston, the more that picture faded. Billboards gave way to manicured hedges and gated communities. The houses grew larger, the cars sleeker. I passed a wrought iron gate with gold lettering Osprey Point. Ryan's address was just a few turns beyond it. At a stoplight, my phone buzzed. A new message from Ryan Traffic's bad here, take your time. We'll have everything ready when you arrive. No emoji, no extra words. Just that. As I drove through the final stretch, I noticed security cameras on every corner, street lamps polished to a shine. It was the kind of neighborhood where people locked their gates but left their doors wide open because they thought they knew who to trust. When my GPS announced arriving at destination, I slowed in front of a stone-columned estate with perfect landscaping and a fountain out front. 2 cars sat in the driveway, a black Lexus and a silver Mercedes. Neither belonged to my son. Something in my chest tightened. This wasn't just a family dinner, this was something else. The front door opened before I even reached the steps. Sophie stood there in a cream-colored dress, her hair swept back like she'd just stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. "Mr. Walker," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "you made it." Her perfume drifted toward me, light, expensive, unfamiliar. Before I could answer, Ryan appeared behind her, all charm and perfect posture. He wore a tailored navy suit I'd never seen before, the kind that cost more than my first pickup truck. "Dad," he said warmly, pulling me into a hug that lasted just a second too long. "You look great, really great." The foyer was something out of an architectural spread marble floors, a sweeping staircase and an oil painting above the mantel that probably wasn't a print. Fresh flowers sat in crystal vases, their scent mixing with whatever Sophie had cooking. "Let's get you comfortable," Sophie said, taking my coat before I could refuse. Her hand brushed mine, cool. Steady, but she didn't hold my gaze. Maria, the housekeeper, emerged quietly from a side hallway. She looked to be in her late 50s, wearing a simple black dress and a guarded expression. When our eyes met, there was something there, not warmth, not exactly fear, but something. Ryan clapped his hands. "Dinner's almost ready. We've got a bottle of bourbon to open and a lot to talk about." And that's when I noticed the bourbon was already on the dining table. And it was the same bottle I'd brought. The dining room was set like a scene from a glossy home magazine. Mahogany table polished to a mirror shine white linen napkins folded into perfect peaks, silverware lined up with military precision. The chandelier above cast warm light that danced across crystal glasses too, already filled with amber bourbon. "Let's start with a toast," Ryan said, his smile steady, but eyes scanning me as if measuring my reaction. He slid one of the glasses toward me. Sophie leaned in, her voice smooth. "To family," she said. "To forgiveness and new beginnings." I lifted my glass, watching the bourbon catch the light. It looked perfect, smelled perfect. Still, I only let it touch my lips before setting it down. Maria entered quietly with the first course, a lobster bisque that smelled rich enough to fill the entire room. Her hands were steady, but when she set the bowl in front of me, her eyes met mine for the briefest moment. A flicker. Gone before I could read it. Ryan filled my glass again without asking. "Dad, You've been running those stores for decades. Ever thought about slowing down?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Sophie smiled, tilting her head just so. "It's only natural to start thinking about the future Thomas." I sipped water instead, letting the bourbon sit untouched in front of me. If this was just dinner, why did it feel like a negotiation? Halfway through the soup, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down an unknown Charleston number. Probably a wrong call, I thought, until the message flashed across my screen in all caps. "Get up and leave. Do not drink anything." The words hit harder than the bourbon ever could. My pulse quickened. I slid the phone back into my pocket, keeping my face neutral. Sophie's voice cut through the clink of silverware. "Thomas, you look a little pale. Is everything all right?" I forced a small smile. "Just the heat. Savannah to Charleston this time of year, it takes it out of you." Ryan leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "You sure you haven't touched your bourbon?" "Thought you brought it special." Maria reappeared, collecting empty bowls. As she passed behind me, her hand brushed my shoulder just enough for me to notice. When I glanced back, her eyes darted to the untouched bourbon, then to the hallway leading toward the back of the house. A silent message, "Go." I picked up my water glass instead, draining it slowly while thinking. If I walked out now, I'd confirm my suspicion, but I might never know the full truth. If I stayed, I might get answers, or I might not walk out at all. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed. Ryan smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ready for the main course, Dad?" The scent of roasted meat drifted from the kitchen, warm and inviting, but now it carried something darker. I could almost feel the weight of that text in my pocket, every letter pressing against my skin. Maria's silent warning echoed in my head. "Go!" Ryan pushed back his chair and stood, his smile fixed. "Let me carve the roast, Dad. You just sit and relax." Sophie slipped into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the marble like a metronome counting down. I glanced toward the hallway Maria had indicated. It led past a side door out toward the driveway. I could be gone in under a minute, if I moved now, but leaving without answers felt like losing before the fight began. I'd built a life by facing problems head-on, not running from them. Claire, God rest her soul, would never forgive me for walking away blind. Ryan returned with the roast on a silver platter, setting it in front of me with exaggerated care. "Just like Mom used to make," he said almost too sweetly. His hands lingered on the carving knife a moment longer than necessary. I forced a smile, my decision settling like cold steel in my gut. I'd stay for now, but I wouldn't be playing their game. "Why don't we eat?" I said evenly, "and then you can tell me exactly what's on your mind, son." Ryan froze for half a second before recovering his grin. "Of course, Dad, of course." The roast sat between us, steam curling into the chandelier light. Ryan carved slowly, each slice deliberate as if buying time. Sophie poured wine into my glass without asking, her hand steady, her smile practiced. We ate in silence for a few moments. Then Ryan set down his fork and leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Dad," he began, voice lower now, "you've done incredible things with the stores. Built something from nothing. But you can't run them forever." I kept my expression calm, my fork resting on the edge of my plate. "What are you suggesting?" Sophie jumped in her tone, almost sweet. "Ryan and I have been thinking, maybe it's time to make things easier for you. We could take over the operations, handle the day-to-day. You'd still get a generous income, of course." "Generous," I repeated, tasting the word like it might be spoiled. Ryan leaned closer. "It's about legacy, Dad. Passing the torch while you're still here to see it thrive." I studied their faces. Ryan's jaw was tight, his eyes flicking towards my untouched bourbon. Sophie's hands were folded neatly, but her knuckles were pale from the pressure. "What would that involve?" I asked slowly. Ryan's answer came too quickly. "Just a few documents. Standard transfer of ownership, we've got them ready in my office." Maria entered with dessert plates, her movements deliberate. As she set mine down, her fingers brushed the table, tapping twice. A signal. "Be careful." I didn't touch the dessert. Instead, I leaned back, letting the silence stretch until even the ticking clock in the hallway felt loud. "Documents ready in your office, huh?" I said finally. Ryan nodded quickly, almost too eagerly. "Yeah, Dad. Everything's straightforward. Just sign tonight and we can handle the rest." "Straightforward." I repeated, my voice low. Sophie leaned forward, her smile tightening. "It's just a formality, Thomas. You can trust us." Trust. That word landed heavy. I thought of the text message, of Maria's warnings, of their eyes flicking to my glass like it was the centerpiece of the table. "You've had a busy week," I said, my gaze shifting between them. "Buying the roast, polishing the silver, preparing legal documents. And I'm guessing sourcing a certain additive for my drink." Sophie froze. Ryan's fork clattered against his plate. "What are you talking about?" he asked, voice sharp. I reached for the bourbon glass, swirling it slowly so the light caught faint, unnatural specks drifting at the bottom. "This," I said evenly, "doesn't look like any bourbon I've ever poured." Maria paused mid-step near the doorway, her eyes locked on mine. She didn't need to speak. We both knew the truth was already out. Ryan's jaw tightened. "You're being paranoid, Dad. No one's trying to hurt you." But his voice lacked the conviction to sell the lie. Ryan stood abruptly, the chair scraping across the hardwood like a warning siren. "Enough games, Dad. Let's just go sign the papers." His voice had lost the smooth salesman charm. Now it was tight, urgent. Sophie reached for my glass. "Here, at least finish your drink first." She said, her tone too bright. I pulled it back, my eyes never leaving hers. If I wanted poison Sophie, I'd have poured it myself. Her smile cracked. The mask was gone. Ryan took a step toward me, hands flexing at his sides. "This doesn't have to be ugly. Just sign, and we'll all walk away with something." I let the silence settle for a beat, then reached slowly into my pocket. The faint click of my phone's recorder app filled the space between us. "I think we're past pretending," I said evenly. "Maybe you'd like to repeat that last line for the police." Ryan froze. Sophie's eyes darted toward the hallway, calculating an exit. Maria stepped forward from the doorway, no longer hiding her presence. "The police are already on their way," she said, her voice steady. "I made sure of it." Ryan's face went pale. "You called them." Maria didn't blink. "You were going to drug your own father." Someone had to. Outside, the low hum of approaching sirens grew louder. I set the bourbon glass in the center of the table, the specks swirling like the last of their lies. The flashing blue and red lights painted the white columns of Ryan's mansion in harsh, unflattering colors. 2 officers led Ryan down the front steps, his wrists locked in cold steel. Sophie followed her protests, sharp but hollow. I stood at the doorway, the cool Charleston night brushing against my face. For a long moment I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Ryan glanced back, eyes pleading. "Dad, you can fix this." I shook my head slowly. "You broke it, son. You fix it." The officers guided them into separate cars. Engines rumbled, doors slammed shut. And just like that, the people I had once called family were gone, replaced by defendants in a case for attempted poisoning and fraud. Maria stepped beside me, her voice soft. "You did the right thing." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the courage it had taken to risk everything for someone she barely knew. "You saved my life," I said simply, "and now I'd like to return the favor." I offered her a position managing my newest restaurant. She hesitated only a moment before nodding, her eyes bright. Charleston's humid breeze carried the distant sound of waves from the harbor. For the first time in months, I felt steady. Justice had been served. And to those watching this, remember, truth has a way of surfacing. Stay sharp, and never underestimate who might be sitting at your dinner table. Subscribe, because the next story might just save you too. The next morning, Charleston woke under a pale gold sunrise. From my porch, I could see the quiet street where last night's police cars had lined up. The mansion at the end of the block stood silent now, its lights cold, its windows empty. I brewed a pot of coffee, Margaret's old ritual, and thought about the night before. Betrayal like that doesn't just vanish with the dawn, but neither does resolve. Maria arrived at my door, right on time, holding a small paper bag. "Breakfast," she said simply. Inside was a still warm biscuit from the corner bakery. No manipulation, no agenda, just kindness. We drove to the restaurant together. The Crown Street location still smelled faintly of fresh paint, the sign over the door bright in the morning light. "This will be yours to run," I told her. Her eyes widened. "You trust me that much." "I trust what you've proven," I replied. As we walked through the empty dining room, I could almost hear the echo of future conversations. Laughter, clinking glasses, honest work being rewarded. This was what family was supposed to feel like. By noon, Maria was already rearranging the front counter, making the place hers. I stepped outside, letting the Charleston breeze carry the scent of the harbor. The weight on my shoulders felt lighter. To those listening, remember, betrayal can come from those closest to you, but so can loyalty. Sometimes the right people enter your life exactly when the wrong ones leave. And if you want more stories that reveal the truth behind closed doors, subscribe now. The next one might just teach you how to see it coming,